Good morning, distinguished colleagues and participants. It gives me a great pleasure to be here today at the iPRES 2025 holding in Wellington. My name is Elijah Olawale Aziz. I work as a digital librarian at the National Library of Nigeria, which is the apex library in the country. And today I will be presenting alongside my co-author, Aparna Subramanian from the Film and Television Institute of India. Our presentation today explores how digital preservation of cultural heritage can be harnessed as a tool for crisis prevention, peace building, and youth empowerment. Using the Ombatse Crisis in Nasarawa State, Nigeria, as a case study. We will show you how digital technologies, when guided by inclusive frameworks such as the Digital Preservation Coalition, rapid assessment model, popularly known as the DPC RAM, can preserve endangered cultural memories and foster reconciliation in post-conflict societies. Now let's quickly talk about the background of the study. The motivation for this research comes from the devastating impact of the Ombatse crisis in Nigeria Middle Belt, Nasarawa State. Beyond the tragic loss of lives and property, the conflict severely threatened cultural identity, eroding rituals, oral traditions, and community knowledge systems that have existed for centuries and hundreds of centuries ago. Our rationale is very clear. When cultural heritage is lost, identity and memory vanish with it. Digital preservation provides a pathway to safeguard these intangible assets for future generations, of course, our youth, transforming cultural loss into digital continuity. The study was designed to go beyond mere documentation. We wanted to understand how ready cultural institutions in Nigeria are. Cultural institutions such as the libraries, the museums, the archives, the um, palaces, and other cultural institutions. We want to know how readily they are when we talk about digital preservation. We want to know if they are ready to engage in digital preservation and what barriers exist in doing so. And by using the DPC rapid assessment model, we assess organizational, legal, and technological capacities. Then we also propose locally relevant approaches that connect digital preservation directly to peace building and youth empowerment in Nigeria. Our major objective is therefore to establish strategies for the systematic digitization and safeguarding of endangered cultural heritage for present and future generation. In other words, we want to transform preservation from a technical process into a socio-political art of resilience. The Egon people, we need to understand the Ombatse crisis. And before we do this, the Ombatse crisis is a crisis that everyone, different international media organizations captured, talked about around 2013. About 500 plus lives were lost, including around 100 security officers. But before we talk about this crisis, we need to understand the geographical um, location of where this crisis actually happened. What defined those people, what the crisis is all about, and the likes. So we'll talk about the Egon people. They are culturally rich ethnic group and primarily based in Nasarawa State. Nasarawa State is located in north-central Nigeria near Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. The Egon, also known as Mo Egon, the group has historical ties with the Kwarafa kingdom and it is often referred to as Mother Dutse. Mother Dutse is Il Mother in um, Borno State language. We also have it also aligned their initial settlement in hilly regions. They have a population of about 200,000 people. The Egon have also maintained their distinct identity through centuries. Their decentralized pre-colonial society was marked by deep independence, a unique culture, and their own language. The Egon language, which remains widely spoken alongside Hausa and English language. The Egon people are predominantly farmers producing crops such as yam, maize, rice, groundnuts, millets, and other commercial quantities. Their agricultural expertise has been central to their sustenance and trade over the years, thousands of years. Oral traditions also trace the Egon's origin to the present day Borno state. From there, they were part of the influential Kwarafa kingdom before migrating to their current territory. Yes, they eventually settled on the Egon Hill, a name that they derived from the exceptional sense of perception, which the word is called Egon. So this is just a little brief about the Egon people in Nasarawa State, Nigeria. So and to fully understand what our study is all about, we also need to understand what the Ombatse Crisis is all about. So the Ombatse Crisis is a movement that began as a spiritual and cultural revival among the Egon people of Nasarawa State. Ombatse naturally means the time has come. It reflected a generational call for cultural and spiritual protection and renewal. However, the tensions over land, governance, and cultural authority soon to be escalated into one of the deadliest inter-ethnic conflicts in recent Nigeria history. Many cultural custodians were displaced, sacred sites were destroyed, libraries and museums and archives were destroyed, and most importantly, oral traditions were interrupted. Elders were killed. The crisis also exposed how fragile cultural memory becomes when we have all of this crisis in play. Now, what exactly is the problem we identified that prompted us in embarking on this study? The problem that we want to address in this study, is Nigeria's limited progress when we talk about digitizing indigenous knowledge. And despite the enormous cultural wealth in Nigeria, many libraries, museums, and archives still rely on outdated systems and lack both technical infrastructure and human capacity to manage digital content sustainably. In places such as Nasarawa State, Niger State, conflict adds an extra layer of complexity. Not only are physical structures destroyed, libraries destroyed, museums destroyed, palaces destroyed during this crisis, but the oral and visual knowledge system that hold cultural identity are disrupted. Our study therefore identifies the absence of coherent national and local policies, underfunding and low digital literacy as barriers that prevent digital preservation from being used as a strategic tools for peace and inclusion. So talking about our methodologies, our research is basically on qualitative design, and it is designed to capture human experiences rather than just statistics. We conducted several interviews between January and April 2025 across Nasarawa State. We spoke to elders, youth, leaders, spiritual custodians, and government representatives, as well as security personnel that were involved, that were alive even up to now, that were involved during the crisis. And we also review some policy documents, some academic reports and archival materials related to the Ombatse crisis, conflict and cultural heritage management. The aim of this study is in twofold. First, we want to assess how ready local institutions are to preserve digital heritage and to understand how communities themselves perceive the relationship between heritage, peace, and technology. This approach allowed us to center indigenous voices, ensuring the study reflected local realities. Now, talking about cultural heritage preservation policy gap. Our review exposed significant gap in Nigerian heritage preservation framework. Although Nigeria has signed key international instruments such as the UNESCO 2025 Convention, The implementation remains very weak and very slow, especially at the community level. The 1988 rather, National Cultural Policy mentioned identity protection, but offers little on digital strategies. And then the inclusion of local custodians was also not seen. In effect, the people who hold the most valuable cultural knowledge, elders, storytellers, youths, and ritual leaders, are structurally excluded from formal policy processes. This leaves intangible knowledge unprotected. And as seen in the Ombatse crisis, um, once conflict erupts, of course, there is no structured way to recover what has been lost. We argue that inclusive digital forward policy reform is therefore essential for sustainable preservation. So in digital preservation in crisis prevention, how important is this? So in conflict-prone societies, just like we have in Egon, Nasarawa State, we also have in Abuja, we have in Niger State, we have in Borno State, and some other states across the country. Digital preservation does more than just protect data. It prevents crisis. When we record oral histories, rituals, festivals, and communal laws, we strengthen collective identity, ensuring communities retain a shared sense of belongings even under stress. Digital archive also reduce misinformation and distortion, key drivers of violence, by making authentic, verified histories accessible to all sides of a conflict. When people can see themselves in the same historical record, of course, peace building begins to take the roots. So rather than just reacting to crisis after they occur, digital preservation becomes an anticipatory tool, helping to maintain cohesion and prevent escalation of ethnic or cultural tensions. Let's also look at digital preservation for peace building. As much as digital preservation is important in crisis, it is also very, very important in peace building. One of our strongest insights from our study is that digital preservation can serve as a platform for peace building. When communities digitize their oral histories and rituals, they reclaim agencies over how their stories are told. For example, while external media often portray the Ombatse movement solely as militant, for instance, it was recorded by Aduzeras and CBN and other international broadcasting organizations like that. Our findings therefore reveal it's deeper than that. Okay, we observe the spiritual renewal and communal justice. Also, digitizing such histories enables communities to correct misconception, especially by international organizations that are not practically on ground. Some of them are not practically on ground, and then we also promote understanding of what actually transpired when communities are directly involved in digital preservation. So community archive then become powerful peace tools. What just as Messiah calls it, radical interventions, allowing victims and survivors to narrate trauma and resilience in their own voices. In essence, preservation transforms from a passive record keeping exercise into an active form of healing and reconciliation. We also need to look at digital preservation for youth empowerment. Of course, this is very, very important. Youth are one of the major tools that are used in this communal crisis. So they need to be engaged. So when we talk about youth empowerment, it is central to the sustainability of cultural preservation. In Nasarawa State, for instance, the Ombatse crisis created a generational disconnect. Young people grew up without access to sacred knowledge or living traditions. Digital preservation bridged the gap by providing tools for youth to document, interpret, and celebrate their heritage using modern technologies such as social media, websites, web archiving, and the likes. So through oral history, with projects and participatory digital archive, young people become co-creators of their culture rather than mere observers. This also opens door for digital entrepreneurship. turning heritage into creative, educational, and economic opportunities. When the youth are engaged as digital custodians, they inherit not just the data, not just the information, not just the culture, but also identity and purpose. Now, we also need to look at the DPC RAM model. How can we apply this to the case of the Ombatse? So the DPC RAM models, the DPC is a Digital Preservation Coalition Rapid Assessment Model. It's popularly known as DPC. So when I say DPC RAM, so this is what I meant by that. So it offers very simple yet powerful framework for measuring institutional readiness. It also evaluates 6 dimensions from policy and legal foundations to IT capacity, community involvement, and the likes. So in our own study, we adapted this framework to assess libraries and cultural centers in Nasarawa State that were directly affected by the Ombatse crisis. What makes DPC RAM unique is that it does not just diagnose weaknesses. It also provides a roadmap for growth, helping institutions move from ad hoc digitization to structured, sustainable preservation system. This model allows us to align technical evaluation with social and ethnical imperative, a balance that is crucial in post-conflict context. Now we want to look how exactly do we apply DPC RAM to the Ombatse crisis. So when we apply this DPC RAM to the Ombatse cases, 3 dimensions stood out as particularly transformative. Community, organizational visibility, and policy and strategy. First, by centering the community preservation become participatory. Elders contributed oral histories while youth handle the digital process, fostering intergenerational trust. Second, organizational viability. Ensure these initiatives were not short-lived but rooted in governance structures that could sustain them beyond just donor circles. And finally, also, policy and strategy tied everything together, framing heritage as a peace-building tool rather than a static archive. This integrated approach demonstrates how the DPC RAM framework can translate memory into social repair. Now, what are our findings? Our findings reveal deep structural and social barriers to digital preservation in Nigeria. Many institutions lack policies, trainings, and infrastructure, while cultural custodians, those who hold the knowledge, are left out of official frameworks. There is also limited coordination between libraries, museums, archives, and also some community cultural institutions. However, applying the DPC RAM model highlighted realistic pathway forward, especially when communities are placed at the center. We found that when digital preservation is community owned, it shifts from being a bureaucratic exercise to a transformative practice that fosters empowerment, healing, and inclusion. This insight is critical for designing future heritage strategy in other conflict affected regions. Now we have some limitations which we would also like to also highlight. Of course, every research project has its own boundaries, and ours is no exception. Our work focused specifically on the Egon community, which limits how far we can generate the findings across Nigeria or Africa. We also rely heavily on oral testimonies, which can be subjective or influenced by trauma. We also have some security conditions and limited funding, made difficult to conduct broader participatory digitization exercise. And also, additionally, out of respect for communities' ethics, we did not document sacred or restricted knowledge. Nevertheless, these limitations underscores the urgent need for investment in local infrastructure, training, and ethical frameworks that will allow future studies to expand this work responsibly and inclusively. Now, our conclusion is that the evidence from the Ombatse case make one thing very, very clear. Digital preservation is not just a technical art, but a human and ethical commitment. It preserves not only files and images, but the very stories that hold communities together. When heritage is destroyed, so too are identity, memory, and belongings. The Digital Preservation Coalition model provides a roadmap for building sustainable institutional capacity, but its success depends largely on collaboration between community scholars and policymakers. Our call to action is simple. Let us reimagine preservation as a collective, future-oriented practice, one that connects peace, memory, and empowerment across generation. So, and to make this finding actionable, we recommend two clear approach, both policy and at national level. At the national policy level, Nigeria and other countries, with similar context, must establish a digital heritage strategy that embed preservation in governance, post-crisis construction, and local custodians. The true keepers of culture must be recognized as equal partners in the process. At national level, libraries, archives, and museums should also invest in digital infrastructure, train their staff, and build cross-sector collaboration. So on this, we want to say a very big thank you for listening, and we also say a big thank you to the organizers for allowing us to make our presentation and also get involved in the international dialogue on digital preservation. Thank you so much, and God bless you.